Okay, everyone, this video is in light of recent events. This is a note I wrote on Facebook this morning in the early hours while I was still at work. It is entitled, Read It or Not, My Best at the Second with the First. In other words, meaning my best at the Second Amendment using my First Amendment rights. I'll be reading this from Microsoft Word, which I copy and pasted what I posted on Facebook, and I double stacked the sentences so it would be much easier on my eyes. I will start by saying that whether you agree with me or not, you will have a hard time disproving the facts I'm about to spell out to you. Let's get started. I would like to say, first of all, I agree for all the victims of violence in the world. Yes, the world. Not just the United States of America. Those victims of violence, regardless what instrument or motive was used. To the people in Connecticut, I can't imagine your loss at all, and that's why I don't want to go through it if I don't have to. I want a fighting chance. I want a possible alternate ending to any situation. I want the Second Amendment and my right to bear arms for defense. How many that read this, given the chance because of how mad and hurt you were after the shooting on Friday, would have wanted to kill that boy that did it? Had he not committed suicide? How many of you would want a slow, painful death for him? Want him to suffer for his transgressions? In the eyes of the law, you are wrong. He is innocent until proven guilty in the court of law. But wait, you know he did it. You know 100%, but yet that does not matter. If you kill him maliciously, whether it be with good intentions of taking him and his violence out of this world, you would be wrong and held accountable, tried, and probably convicted. That's the law for you. You knew going into this murder was wrong, right? But you did it anyway, because you wanted to. You felt like you were right in your convictions in killing this child slayer and keeping him from further harming anyone else. You let your emotion and your racing mind cloud your judgment, and you made a hasty decision without thinking of the consequences involved. You were doing what is right, and you served justice, but in the eyes of the law, you were no better than he was. You feel wronged, violated. You feel like a scapegoat, right? Like you were unjustly punished because you took care of business. Take this feeling you have and apply it to those who are oppressed and feel violated about losing what right we have left to defend oneself against such violence. If you look at history, you can see why us media labeled quote-unquote hillbilly redneck gun toters realize the importance of having a constitution that gives us the right to defend ourselves against any threat, whether it be a tyrannical reign of the government or some sociopath on a killing spree. Look at Nazi Germany. Hitler was not freely elected, a common myth. He lost the popular vote just like many presidents in our past have lost the popular vote of the United States. Hitler was put in power because of special interests. He had raised enough money that the other candidates, even though winning the favor of the people, could not overcome the political juggernaut seen in the Nazi Party. I give you the Electoral College. It sounds familiar, doesn't it? How have so many presidents lost the popular vote that should be what counts and still won the presidency, fair and square, quote unquote? Please. Money, 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 and power. That's how. Sort of similar to Nazi Germany, right? Lots of money, lots of supreme power for them. Lest we not forget that Hitler enacted gun control. He armed his army and disarmed the citizens for their protection so that the guns wouldn't make them kill each other and enact violence. Sounds like the gun control movement in America too, to quote-unquote protect us from one another. After all, they told them, the police and military will protect you. You don't need guns. Only they do. But it's funny how wars were fought with stones and sticks and other primitive weapons before guns were ever invented. But don't worry. Because you don't have them, you will be safer. Let's just see how safe were the Polish, the Swiss, the French, the other countries during the Holocaust. They were pretty safe, right? They didn't have to worry about being scared of each other. The Nazi government took care of that for them when they stormed the ghettos, took people at gunpoint, and those that they didn't execute on the spot hoarded them together into forced slave labor and mass executions where they were completely defenseless, powerless, and told them they would be okay by the government. Oh, wait. You said that this kid in Connecticut executed a mass killing of innocent, powerless, unarmed, and defenseless little kids, right? When they were ensured that because their school was a gun-free zone, and the doors were locked, they were completely safe. They had nothing to worry about. Fantasyland. Do I really need to go on with this? Can't you see that it's plainly evident? I'm sure the people of the Holocaust would have loved to have a fighting chance at freedom. I mean, look at how many were reportedly killed in the genocide. Around 6 million. Imagine if they had been armed. Because remember, the Nazis didn't have robots they just machined out and overwhelmed the Jews. They took over the countries little by little and trained them into their resistance with the promise of protection. Just as the government does not take your freedoms in one fell swoop. They do it little by little, by getting footholds with smaller arguments until they have such a presence that the bigger arguments are easy to manipulate with their fear tactics to overthrow and overwhelm. Just like Nazi Germany. A resistance of just the 6 million would, even if every one of them was slain, would have been a better outcome than them being just slain anyway, with no resistance. I say they could have taken as many of the Nazi bastards with them as they could manage. It surely would have made our jobs in World War II, as America, probably a lot easier. I ask, do you still sympathize that we need gun control because guns are evil? Do you want your freedom of speech taken away because people heckle on Facebook so much that kids commit suicide too? Do you want porn taken away off the internet? Because we all know it instantly makes a man a poon-thirsty rapist who will run the streets unopposed raping women and children left and right. Well, not in my neighborhood or my house. Why do you say? Because I have the right under the Second Amendment to defend my life and those dear to me with a firearm that will take any rapist, any murderer, any burglar, or other evildoer to the ground with a good shot placement. Threat over. Tragedy and week-long news story that we're going to pound to death into the ground like a beaten horse is all prevented. For those in the discussion of crossfire injuring the other innocent bystanders during an active shooter event, your argument is not without points that are plausible at least, but I give you this. How would the police stop an active shooter? If they enter the premises of which the shooting is happening, they are at risk, which is the same argument you have for a concealed carry weapons holder. You're making yourself a target. Yes, I agree, but this is a judgment call and risk that you as an individual, as I say again, have the right as an American to decide whether or not to use the firearm you have with you. It is your decision. The police at best respond, and depending on staffing and other issues of that day, of which are not in anyone's control, decide how fast and how appropriate their response is. I will even go as far-fetched to say that don't you think a shooter who plans these shootings could even have the presence of mind to set decoys or distraction-type emergencies to initiate a mass gathering of police resources to one point, the opposite direction, knowing that he can now go unstopped and unopposed to his current location for a while until they then realize that their presence is needed elsewhere. It's a basic military tactic, deception-based warfare. Any resistance offered to a gunman by a concealed carry weapons holder cannot unmistakably be seen in the choice of two routes for the shooter. Route number 1. Shooter is shooting innocent sheep in a killing field. Unopposed. The concealed carry weapons holder draws weapon and returns fire in the direction of said shooter. In this decision, the shooter goes on about his way of shooting the unarmed citizens, thus suscepting himself to the gunfire of the concealed carry weapons holder, most likely rendering him either incapacitated or deceased. Scenario 2 is the same scenario, but the shooter decides to return fire onto the concealed carry weapons holder in fear of being killed. Thus, fire is not focused on the other innocent people that are either fleeing or, better yet, finding positive cover and reducing their profile for the shooter. Either way, at some point, fire will either be diverted or cease from the active shooter. But Alex, innocent people could get hit in the meantime. Yes, I know this. I will not argue that this cannot happen, as that would be completely an ignorant stance. But at this point, when the gunman is popping off rounds like it's the 4th of July, can you really say you're putting anyone at any more danger than he is? Remember my discussion from earlier of how you wanted to kill the menacing shooter of Newtown? There's a common theme here. As a concealed carry weapons holder firing on an active shooter, you are under the right of defense of one's life from grievous bodily harm or death, but you are not covered under any right if you go and blow the shooter's head off later on after the threat has been neutralized. You will argue you acted on a flippant instinct, a knee-jerk emotional reaction because so many people were slain. How is this any different from the concealed carry weapons holder, with a knee-jerk reaction to preserve one's life with the use of a firearm to neutralize the same shooter while still a threat? The difference is the concealed carry weapons holder is covered. You are not. If you feel that it's right to go about committing vigilante justice to serve your own personal needs, you go right ahead. But you have no right to argue that guns are the problems and laws are the solutions if you will make an excuse of your own not to abide by the law. You may think it's wrong to be tried for murder under that circumstance, just as I think it's wrong for law to be rewritten to take away my right to defend myself. You cannot argue the fact that guns are a tool. Yes, they make killing easier, but killing is only as easy as one's decision to do it in the first place. If you have no constraints on killing, and your mind is made up to do it, it won't matter whether your gun jams. You'll use a shovel, hatchet, knife, or any other blunt force instrument to complete the task at hand you had. But Alex, you say, these crazy people, they don't fear death. I mean, they're crazy. They don't understand death and how it's permanent. Bullshit. Yes, they do. They do understand death. They choose not to apply the understanding of death in a real-world situation. You may argue that your gun-toting will not stop them because they don't care if you kill them. You're right. The fact I have a gun pointed at them might not stop them, but when I put two in their chest and one in their head, rendering them either in cardiac arrest or paralyzed, that surely will, no matter whether they fear, understand, or even know about death. Babies die every day that know nothing about death, but yet it still happens. And their lives are ended, and they can no longer do anything they ever wanted to do in their short time on this earth, just as the shooter would no longer be doing harm, because he would be deceased or rendered neutralized. In closing, I would like for you to reflect on what I've said, and ultimately look at what the problem is. It's mankind. We hurt one another every day. Whether maliciously or accidentally, we hurt one another. This fact is 100% true, and you cannot deny it. We cannot legislate morals and thought. No bill on Capitol Hill ever stopped someone who wanted to buy crack or heroin from breaking said law and doing it. But what did stop it was the proactive work of a drug task force, who didn't just sit and wait, hoping that someone might feel guilty about breaking the law and just turn themselves in. Just like someone that wants weapons that are banned are just going to feel guilty and not get them, or they'll turn them in. They initiated operations to catch them in the act, to stop them while in the act of dealing or buying, just like we can stop people in the acts of violence they are committing with responsible training and education of concealed deadly weapons. I don't know about you, but tell me, would you feel more guilty knowing you could have helped one person, but you were afraid you would risk others? Or would you feel more guilty knowing you helped no one for the same guilt, the same fear of guilt? You helped no one. Would you just let someone walk up to you and say, "Give me your purse, car, or any other precious item," and not think after it was over, "Man, I sure wish I had some way I could have prevented that, or stopped it in its tracks"? Yes, we all would. And if you don't think that, you're not human. I urge you to consider these thoughts. You don't have to take them as the gospel, but I urge you to think to yourself any reason why you wouldn't want to equal your chance of survival in any critical incident, just like the ones I have mentioned. You eat right, you exercise, you watch your weight, go to checkups routinely for your personal health, and hopes to avoid a life-ending or quality-compromising health problem. But what's the use if you don't do the simplest things to give yourself a chance? A lot easier than dieting, and that's owning a firearm and learning a responsible and smart way to use it, and having it at a moment's notice when seconds count, and your local police are only minutes away. Yes, I said that, when seconds count, and your police are minutes away. I close with this. The biggest weapon we shall fear of the evildoer is the mind, for his mind is determined to do wrong, not any instrument in which he uses to further thus cause. Thank you for listening, and I hope common sense has been spewed to you today, and I hope that you take it and think. Just think. What's right for this country? Our rights are right for this country.